So while Saudi Arabia is doing their part, supposedly to conduct an investigation internally, we need to just get to the bottom of the facts. And I would imagine that we're going to end up coming across some level of transparency from the Saudi government. It may not be enough. I think that the Turkish investigation is one that can keep Saudi Arabia honest, because if they have hard-nosed evidence, Saudi Arabia has already been caught in one lie after another. They tried to get ahead of stories here that just were not true. Our role here is ensuring that facts are provided to the family, and that we as a nation and the world is able to move forward with the consequence of, okay, what do we do next? What do we do about this to send a message with zero tolerance?
I want to be delicate in saying this, because I know the family may feel differently. I know Khashoggi has children in this country. He has ties to this country. He was U.S. based. But it's my understanding that he is not a legal permanent resident of the United States. In fact, he's a Saudi citizen, and that his last entry was in the past year or so. Technically is like a visa, a visitor visa per business. Where does that put us in terms of being able to put some pressure on getting to the facts?
Well, in interpreting the Magnitsky Act and the consequences that should result as it relates to sanctions, that will be interesting to hear if the administration has a take that believes that Magnitsky doesn't apply. I have not heard that yet. I know that there are certainly many members of Congress and the Senate sent a letter to the administration on that front. He is also a journalist. He was living here, working for the Washington Post. He has kids who are here in this country.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, we have many different reasons for us to be concerned, but let's just say he wasn't even a resident of the United States and he was a journalist abroad. You read that new column that came out in the Post, it's chilling, and it's very accurate with regards to the state of play within Saudi Arabia. So for a journalist, whether it's in the United States, Saudi Arabia, or elsewhere, to feel like they are able to bring to light facts to improve the people, in the millions of people in their country, to tackle human rights abuses, for there to be accountability, if the consequence of that is that you will end up getting dismembered, and that there will be a cover-up from a foreign government, even if Khashoggi wasn't even an American resident. Right. We should all be concerned, the world should be concerned with the treatment of journalists like that.
Congressman, that may seem like such a basic question, but I really appreciate you laying out the stakes, because as people try to politicize everything, there's no politics in what you're saying. That's human relations. I want to move on. There have been some decisions made as we wait in the gap for answers and facts in the investigations, plural, that you listed there by Turkey and Saudi Arabia. And one of them is that our Secretary of Treasury is now not going to attend that investors conference. What do you make of that? And is there anything else coming down the pike that we should know about in terms of our reaction as a nation?
Well, that's the right call that Secretary Mnuchin made after he met with the President of the United States. He met with the Secretary of State. There are many others who have pulled out of that conference as well. This is, you could say, the strongest move that's been made to date, is Secretary Mnuchin not going over there. Focus number one needs to be on this investigation and getting facts. And a lot of people are upset that there hasn't been good transparency and honesty on the part of Saudi Arabia. Remember, their story was that Khashoggi walked out the back door of the consulate. So while we're trying to get at facts, we also have a relationship with Saudi Arabia that is one that trust is taking a hit, and the rest of the world is watching. So for another nation to see Secretary Mnuchin heading over to Saudi Arabia like there's no big issue otherwise, for other nations that might engage in bad activity, possibly targeting journalists or other human rights abuses or suppression of free speech and whatnot, if we have a tolerance for Saudi Arabia's activities, then other nations might engage in that same behavior going forward.
Real quickly before we go, can we pop up the corner of Wall and Broad, the Dow Jones right now? Now, our family members, congressmen, as we like to call them over at the Fox Business Network, have been reporting that, in part, this is some impressionability or impact from this conversation around the death of this journalist and the investigation, but more importantly, the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. How would you describe the relationship between the two countries today on this Thursday?
It's been weakened, and there's no way to strengthen it without Saudi Arabia coming clean as to exactly what they know, what happened, and it's going to have to get addressed. And really, the best way to address it will be for the king to be taking action that the rest of the world can have faith that there's a legitimate, not just a legitimate investigation, but also legitimate accountability. Because if the king does not provide accountability within his own ranks in that government, then there's going to be even more of a call for the rest of the world to do it for them.
Well, we sent our top diplomat, Secretary of State Pompeo, today, and one of the things we learned is they're requesting now of the administration of the White House just a little bit more time for Saudi Arabia to come with those facts. We're watching it moment by moment. Congressman Zeldin of the great state of New York, thank you.
Thank you, Harris.
A Fox News alert on this. President Trump going after Democrats and threatening to close the nation's southern border with Mexico as that massive caravan of Honduran migrants is inching toward the United States. The commander-in-chief tweeting this morning, "I am watching the Democrat Party led," parenthetically, because they want open borders and existing weak laws, assault on our country by Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, whose leaders are doing little to stop this large flow of people, including many criminals, from entering Mexico to the United States. Kevin Cork, live outside the White House. Kevin?
Harris, good afternoon. They are moving this way, those migrants, by the thousands, and the Trump administration is determined to stop them, even if that means pressuring our neighbors to the south to somehow intervene. You mentioned those three countries that the president mentioned in his tweet. Let me take you back to social media and share more of what the president had to say about that. He was talking about Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. He said, in addition to stopping all payments to these countries, which seem to have almost no control over their population, I must, in the strongest terms, ask Mexico to stop this onslaught. And if unable to do so, I will call up the U.S. military and close our southern border. He added this: the assault on our country at our southern border, including the criminal elements and drugs pouring in, is far more important to me as president than trade or the USMCA. Hopefully Mexico will stop this onslaught at their northern border. All Democrats' fault for weak laws. A column of 4,000 Honduran migrants marching through Guatemala toward the Mexico border. We've seen the pictures. Of course, the president first threatened to pull back aid from any country that allowed the caravan to keep going. Then he said the military could be called up to secure the border if necessary. Now, this appears to be, he says, a political maneuver by Democrats, timed specifically for the midterm elections, which is in part why the president says if you're a Republican, you need to get out and vote.
You look at the border, how bad it is. That's because the Democrats want it to be bad, because they don't give us the votes. That's why I hope we do very well in the midterm.
That, of course, was the president yesterday. This was his opponent in the 2016 campaign, Hillary Clinton, saying this: the administration's deadline to reunite families that separated at the border passed 12 weeks ago today. What is their plan to rectify this great wrong and do it immediately? Now, obviously, that is part of the argument here, that the Democrats really want this to sort of have a political feel to it, maybe stir up their base ahead of the midterm elections. I should also add this very quickly, Harris. We know that the Mexican officials have sent a couple of 727s full of federal police in Mexico to their border with Guatemala. They say they are there to maintain order at the border, not necessarily to detain them. We'll be watching it carefully. Back to you.
Okay, before I let you go, because you dropped that nugget on me right now, 727s filled with federal police. Are they arresting people? Are they stopping them from coming into their country? I know you say they're not detaining them, but are they stopping them?
That's a great question. What we understand is they are being positioned at the border to restore order or to maintain order. Now, I think that's code, quite frankly, for we have heard directly from the Trump administration that we need to do something. We don't want to blow up the USMCA. So I think it's a fair bet that the Mexican authorities are going to make it difficult for this migrant caravan to make its way all the way through their country. We'll have to see, though. Back to you.
All right, and I want to get the countries involved again. You say Mexico and the border, but there are three countries between here and Honduras.
Well, exactly. Guatemala, you've got Honduras, you've got El Salvador, and for the record, especially those of you who have lived in the southern part of this country, you know that migrants come from all over Central and South America through Mexico and into this country. And I should also say this: there are a number of folks who believe this is simply headed for Texas. Trust me, there are other other caravans that are actually trying to make their way, Harris, to the California border. Things could be very different there. So, again, it is a cat and mouse game, and we'll see if this all plays out and comes to a head, I think, most notably before the midterms.
I want to bring you back on this issue on another day and get into where these other caravans are happening and all that, Kevin Corr, because I know you're watching it all. Thank you very much. Right now, someone to talk to on this is the former acting director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Tom Homan, is with me, a Fox News contributor as well. Tom, always great to get your expertise on this. Did you hear what Kevin just said? He said that there are a couple of 727s filled with Mexican federal police who are stopping people, not stopping them, but I guess watching the situation to make sure it remains orderly. Why not stop them from coming into Mexico? What is going on?
Well, look, I think the president threw down the gauntlet like he should have, and I think Mexico's going to respond. I agree with your White House correspondent. If I had to guess, Mexico's going to do the right thing. People from the Central America cannot travel through Mexico without what we call a transit visa issued by the country of Mexico. So I'm hoping the Mexican officials, these law enforcement officers going down their southern border, are there waiting for this caravan to arrive, and will either turn them back and not issue them transit visas, or let them apply for asylum in Mexico.
Great information. And my big question is, there's more than one country between where these people are coming from and our U.S. border. What is happening that they get to just go, and you talk about transient visas in Mexico, but what about the other countries involved? Are they just writing papers and sending these people through? How does it work?
You know, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because this recently started in Honduras, right? And now if these people are really concerned about persecution, fear, and death, and they want to claim political asylum, they are now out of Honduras. They have crossed through Guatemala, and they'll get to Mexico. If they're really escaping fear and persecution, they're already away from that fear. They're in a different country. So they can apply for asylum in India, they can apply for asylum in Mexico. So this isn't really about escaping fear and persecution. This is about getting to the United States to join other families here illegally. That's what it's all about. And because when these people finally do get to immigration court, if they ever do get to the United States, based on the current data now, approximately 80% of them, 8 out of 10, lose their case because they're frivolous, fraudulent claims. So I'm glad you asked that question, because it's really not about persecution and fear. It's about getting to the United States and committing fraud.
Well, and as you say, it may have been about that in the origin, but now they're, 3 countries north, and things have changed in some way, form, or another. A transit visa, if they could get it in Mexico, certainly means that they're allowed to go through that country. Maybe there would be some options. I want to talk with you now about this idea that the president has about sending military to the southern border of our nation. Is that a good idea?
Look, shutting down the border is certainly an option. Look, and it's not the first time it's happened. In 1985, President Reagan shut down a huge part of the border. I remember I was a Border Patrol agent back then, and I remember specifically sitting in a Border Patrol car guarding a port of entry, Tecate, California, because that port of entry was closed, and we were making sure nobody crashed through the gates or jumped the gate at the port of entry. So it's happened before. President Reagan did it when a DEA agent, Kika Camarena, became missing in Mexico, and he wanted an answer from Mexico and wasn't getting them. So he shut the border down, and it wasn't too long where Mexico unfortunately found him. He's been tortured and murdered, but they also arrested people that committed that crime. So this isn't the first time it happened, and the first time President Reagan did, it worked.
Yeah. You know what? You and I sometimes will talk politics because it seems like that's part of everything these days. The president blames Democrats for this situation. Does this become a midterm election issue? And we're only 19 days out. What's your take?
I hope it does, because I've said many times, look, there are loopholes that, like, why these families are coming, because there's no consequence, there's no deterrence, there's no beds. So, I myself went up to the Hill when I was the director. The Secretary Nielsen's been up on the Hill numerous times. The head of CBP, Kevin McAleen's been on the Hill. We've asked them to close these loopholes. For instance, let us hold families for more than 20 days in a family setting until they see a judge. Let's raise the bar of asylum, because 80% of people, they're coached on what to say in Mexico. They get here, they say the right thing, and they get an approval. But when they show up in court, 8 out of 10 lose. So we've asked Congress, fix the threshold on asylum, fix the Florida settlement agreement so we can actually detain family settings until they see a judge. And third, fund ICE what they need, because ICE has asked for 51,000 beds. What do they get? They get 40,000. So they got 10,000, 11,000 less beds they need, which means those that are apprehended by the Border Patrol are going to be released. So this is right at the doorstep of Congress. And the Democrats, I got to agree with the president. They want open borders. They want to abolish ICE, which equals open borders. So I think they pulled the curtain back. I think the American people, I hope the American people are paying attention.
All right, Tom Homan, it's always great to get your perspective. Thank you very much. The president's going to Arizona soon, too. No doubt this conversation will come up there. Republican House lawmakers are looking for answers, as former FBI General Counsel James Baker makes a fresh appearance on Capitol Hill over that controversial report that the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said he would wear a wire during meetings with President Trump and help kick him out of office. Rosenstein strongly denies that claim, but if he did say it, he said it was a joke. But what does Baker have to say about all this? And with the midterm elections, again, 19 days away, there are new Fox News polls out on control of the House and the president's job approval ratings as well. What might they indicate about voters' decisions at the ballot box? Just weeks away, Democrats appear positioned to take control of the House. That's not new, but a new Fox News poll shows more voters favor Democratic candidates in their district, but there's a huge gender gap. Mike Emanuel live from Capitol Hill with more on this. Mike?
Harris, good afternoon. It appears it'll be quite challenging for Republicans to hold on to the House majority in 19 days. The latest Fox poll reveals 49% of likely voters back the Democratic candidate in their House district, while 42% support the Republican. That 7-point gap has remained consistent from last month, and it is outside the poll's margin of error. That leads our pollster to conclude the House would likely flip if the election were held today, noting the numbers have been remarkably stable this campaign season. But a Republican leader who hopes to be the next House Speaker told us he senses things are tightening up.
The intensity level, there was an advantage on the Democratic side. But that has narrowed after viewing what the Democrats had done to Kavanaugh. And so I see the intensity level shifting.
However, the latest polling suggests Republican members and candidates have their work cut out for them, and Republicans appear to be facing a significant gender gap. The latest Fox poll has women favoring the Democratic candidate by 18 points, while men support the Republican by 6. Looking deeper into the numbers, Democrats are up by 56 points among non-white women, by 35 points with women under age 45, and by 19 points with women in the suburbs. The woman who would like to be Speaker again says Democrats are feeling it.
I've never seen anything like it, the mobilization that is out there, the grassroots mobilization. So the next 3 weeks, and even starting a little before, we fully intend to own the ground. Just own.
That ground game is now focused on driving voter turnout. Harris?
You gave me what I needed for my next conversation. Lots of good facts there, Mike Emanuel. Thank you very much. Let's bring in Colin Reed, former Executive Director of America Rising, and Ty Matsdorf, former Deputy Executive Director of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Colin, I'm going to start with you. So a gender gap exists. The numbers are stable at about 7% or so between for people preferring Democrats on a generic ballot. Even with the Kavanaugh confirmation battle, but tightening, what do you make of it?
Well, I think, Harris, on the gender gap question, there were a lot of experts in D.C. who used the gender gap issue to predict why Hillary Clinton would beat Donald Trump 2 years ago, and look how that turned out. But on the other side, in that poll that you just mentioned, you see President Trump's approval numbers getting better. And midterm elections, regardless of what year they are, they have a couple things in common. One, they tend to be referendums on the party in power, so the president's numbers getting better is good news for all Republicans. And two, they tend to be base elections. And the president being out there everywhere, flooding the zone with interviews, with town halls, with events, that's good news for Republicans because he's the best messenger to drive out the base. And if this is a base election, you want your base out there, and President Trump's the one who can really do that.
So, Ty, why do you think President Trump's approval rating numbers are going up, and what are you going to do to counter that?
Well, I think that two things. One, obviously, when you see the increased intensity from Republicans over Kavanaugh, that has a natural effect of giving them more approval to Trump. But I'm not really sure what you need to do to counter it, because Colin made the point that this is going to drive out his base. And if that's true, then that means the Republicans have already written off about 20 to 25 suburban seats and said, okay, those are lost. Now we just need Trump to make a terrible night, not a catastrophic night.
I didn't hear him say that. Colin, you didn't say that.
Well, Ty makes an interesting point. There are races that are tightening up, and there are places in Hillary Clinton carried districts, like Texas 23, for instance, where the Democrats are abandoning ship. Minnesota 8 has all of a sudden come on the map. It's a race that really shouldn't be competitive. And there are races in Nebraska, for instance, that Hillary Clinton carried. So, look, it's a big battlefield. Both parties are going to be looking to make their best investments. But there are races the Democrats should have easily won by now, and they haven't. And that is going to prevent them from having the kind of blue wave they were predicting a few months ago.
All right, let's talk about women, because Mike Emanuel gave us a lot to chew on in terms of statistics and how they play a part. Democrats are up among non-white women. And the big question is, will they go to the polls?
That's the $64,000 question. I mean, midterms, obviously you always see a drop off in voters. And the question is, the enthusiasm that Democrats have displayed over the past 21 months, everything from special elections, small dollar fundraising, grassroots events, does that carry over to Election Day? Because if the numbers that Mike talked about are correct, and that gap translates into presidential level turnout among women of color, among young women, among suburban women, it will be to the Democrats' advantage. But what you just asked is, does Donald Trump and the political phenomena that is Donald Trump help redefine what midterm electorates look like?
All right. It's interesting because we saw Majority Leader Mitch McConnell do something that some Republicans had been critical of him not doing, and that is recognizing that, maybe they ought to talk about Obamacare and what they're going to do for health care. That's something that all women care about. Does this start to then, 19 days out, change the subject in a way that Republicans can jump on? Colin?
Yeah, well, look, there are a lot of issues out there, and I think to just cast women voters as caring about one issue more than another is kind of unfair. But look, if you're someone who was fired up to come out and vote against Donald Trump, you have felt that way since the day he got inaugurated in January of 2017. If you are someone who's coming and starting to tune in, and you don't like the way that the Democrats have treated, say, Brett Kavanaugh, or some of the angry mobs, or some of the more extreme tactics, now your base is getting fired up as well. So the Democratic base has been fired up from the get-go. The Republican base is starting to come home, and it's going to be a close race down the wire. And just last night, the DCCC executive director said he only predicted a two-seat Democratic majority. So everyone on both sides is doing their best to manage expectations, and I think that blue wave has started to really slow down.
Wow, two seats. Very interesting. Colin, thank you very much. Ty, great to have you on the program, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Former FBI lawyer James Baker is back on Capitol Hill testifying today after what sources have called explosive testimony earlier this month about the run-up to the Russia investigation, what triggered it all, as the House steps up its investigation of its own of alleged anti-Trump bias at the Justice Department. Will there be bombshells today in what we learn on the Hill? A live report with analysis. Stay with us.
He met with Rod Rosenstein, where Mr. Rosenstein said that he was thinking about actually recording the commander-in-chief in the Oval Office, recording the President of the United States. Right after that meeting, Mr. McCabe, Ms. Page come and talk to Jim Baker, and he took that very seriously, what was discussed in that previous meeting. I want to go from there. What did you guys do? Was there some kind of legal analysis of actually looking to record the President of the United States? What subsequent meetings took place?
We were just watching House Judiciary Committee member Jim Jordan before heading into former top FBI lawyer James Baker's closed-door testimony. That is happening today. Jordan says he'll press Baker over the report that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein wanted to secretly record President Trump and invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president from office. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live for us on Capitol Hill. Catherine?
Thanks, Harris. I've just been dipping in and out of this informal gaggle with Congressman Mark Meadows, who's just told reporters that he believes Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, should step down, and that he does believe, based on the testimony they've heard, that he was serious about recording the president. We had something very similar from Congressman Matt Gaetz, who was also in the deposition today. He said Baker, the former general counsel for the FBI, had not backed away from that characterization. It's important to note that James Baker, however, was not in this May 2017 meeting when the comments were allegedly made. He was relying on an account from then acting director Andrew McCabe and FBI lawyer Lisa Page. Here's Matt Gaetz.
It's deeply troubling that you've got the former general counsel for the FBI saying that people were very serious in their reactions to Rod Rosenstein, saying that there was going to be a wire worn by him on the President of the United States, and that there were serious discussions that he was having with cabinet members about invoking the 25th Amendment. I think it's ludicrous that we are having these hearings behind closed doors.
James A. Baker, who's the former general counsel for the FBI and was involved in some of the most important legal decisions involving the Clinton email campaign, investigation rather, and the Russia investigation, arrived on Capitol Hill about 3 hours ago. He did not take reporter questions. Congressman Gaetz told reporters that FBI lawyers intervened, and he was not able to offer full explanations about the FISA application and what he briefed to the Deputy Attorney General. As I just mentioned, there have been these ongoing discussions to get the Deputy Attorney General on Capitol Hill. The committee has expressed an interest in having that interview transcribed so that there is a paper trail, but there has been no agreement to date. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal that was posted late yesterday, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein was asked about this very issue and what was perceived as the president's disappointment that he had yet to appear on Capitol Hill. And he said,
Catherine,
the president knows
step in here for
that I am prepared to do the job as long as he wants me to do that job. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I want to step in because you broke some news, and before we go on with your notes there, it is news that Congressman Mark Meadows now is saying that Rosenstein should step down. I mean, I want to spend a little moment on that. And you can give us more information on other stuff later, but this is important, and that was a gaggle that just broke up right behind you.
That was ongoing. In the course of the gaggle, Congressman Mark Meadows said it was his belief that he felt Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, should step down. He also noted that they'd had more candor from other witnesses who had been willing to come to Capitol Hill, some voluntarily, some with the threat of a subpoena to submit to a transcribed interview. He also noted that there were some topics that were off limits today that had to do with the FISA surveillance warrant, and one of the key questions is what the FBI General Counsel at that time, James A. Baker, briefed to the Deputy Attorney General about the FISA renewal in June of 2017. That was the last one, and Republicans say there was exculpatory information. They want to know whether that was known to the Deputy Attorney General, and he still signed off on that FISA renewal. And they also make the argument that he has an inherent conflict because he's been involved in the FISA renewal process, and they question the legitimacy and the foundation of the surveillance warrant for the Trump campaign aid. But as you mentioned, Harris, sort of the big thank you for interrupting me, by the way.
Oh, no. I wanted to let you know that
Congressman Mark Meadows said he ought to step down.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was breaking up behind you, and you've just given us more information there. So when you say that there was more candor today, something that they heard has now led Congressman Mark Meadows to say Rosenstein has got to go, and now they're bringing in other witnesses, which would inform us, Catherine, that there is potential that others can speak to whether or not the Deputy AG for the nation had said that, yeah, I'll wear a wire for the FBI to invoke the 25th Amendment to kick out President Trump. I mean, this is big news. I want to drill down on it. I thank you. We'll come back to you as you learn more. Let's bring in now,
Harris.
Absolutely. Chris Farrell is the Director of Investigations and Research for Judicial Watch. Chris, when you hear that Congressman Mark Meadows now has heard something in that hearing today that has now got him saying Rosenstein should step down, what do you say?
When you take this breaking news that Catherine just reported and lay it up against sort of this mosaic of incredible corruption and misconduct at the FBI, this is the closest we've ever come in this country to a presidential coup. All of the effort, the power of this agency, the FBI, both a law enforcement and an intelligence agency, was leveraged against the Trump campaign, the Trump transition, and the Trump presidency. And it is, week after week, we learn more and more damning evidence. And this new information, with Mr. Meadows now calling for Mr. Rosenstein to be removed or for him to resign, this is very compelling, very important stuff. And I really believe it points to what was an attempt not just to steer an election, but after the fact to engage in a coup.
Whether he joked about it or not, Chris, when you hear from Catherine Herridge reporting to us with that gaggle that was playing out and then broke up just moments ago with Congressman Mark Meadows, when you hear that now they're looking to call other witnesses and that there might be some cooperation with that, because, people haven't really said much who may have been privy to the former or to the Deputy AG's words about wearing a wire for the FBI and somehow getting enough information from that wire to invoke the 25th Amendment to get President Trump out of the White House. I mean, I wonder who some of these people are and what they can say. And if they corroborate that he actually said that, what does that mean?
Well, look, it's corruption, but it's really a seditious conspiracy against the administration, against the Constitution, frankly. This has been slowly breaking apart, sort of like layers of an onion being peeled back. And the closer we get to the heart of the story, the greater legal jeopardy for all those persons involved, to include Mr. Baker and others that we already know about who have either been disciplined or resigned or under investigation. And as we get closer to the heart of the story, you're going to see people run to make a deal. They're going to try to, in some way, get out ahead of this and either both provide information but also, frankly, cover their own rear ends.
All right, Chris, I'm cutting in on everybody today because of this breaking news, and I appreciate your time and your expertise. We'll continue this. We've had a congressman on the Hill today just suggest that the Deputy Attorney General step down. Stay close. Breaking news, Fox News senior judicial analyst here to break it down with me, Judge Andrew Napolitano. So let me just quickly catch everybody up. Catherine Herridge standing outside the door of where James Baker, an attorney, is testifying today. We see Congressman Mark Meadows in a gaggle behind her saying about the AG Deputy Rod Rosenstein, it is time for him to resign. Something that he heard today potentially has informed him that something's changed. We don't know. And now witnesses are being looked at. Did Rosenstein say, I'll wear a wire for the FBI to kick the president out of the White House?
Apparently he said it, but he intended it to be sarcastic. There were 5 people in the room when he said it. Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, his then bitter adversary in the DOJ, Andrew McCabe, and 3 others unnamed. FBI, senior FBI people. Those 3 interpreted it as sarcastic. Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein says it was sarcastic. The person at whom it was aimed, former FBI agent, now fired for lying to FBI investigators and being investigated by the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. for perjury, Andrew McCabe said it was serious. James Baker, the general counsel to the FBI, who has just told a Congressional House committee that he believed the Rosenstein statement was serious, was not in the room when it was said. So his source is probably Andy McCabe. Now, what did he say? We don't know what he said, but Congressman Meadows said he, Baker, contradicted what Rosenstein has said under oath. We believe Baker. We think Rosenstein was less than candid to us. Fancy word for saying lying. Lying to a congressional committee is a basis for firing. That's where we are.
Okay. And now those 3 unnamed people, we don't know if they're among the witnesses that they would call.
That is correct. We don't. And this is very frustrating, and I've been a critic of the House of Representatives for do this. Government in secrecy. So instead of hearing the actual questions and answers, we will hear a Republican spin by Congressman Meadows and soon a Democratic spin by Congressman or Congresswoman.
But if somebody can corroborate that the Attorney General said this and you say we shouldn't doubt that he did, and that it actually wasn't a funny, and that somebody took it seriously who had the power to put a wire on somebody in the presence of the president, that's what's at stake here. We got to go, but you're going to stay.
Okay.
Come right back.
This program
down on leakers. A senior Treasury Department employee has been charged with leaking financial documents regarding to former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and other key figures in the Robert Mueller investigation. Judge Andrew Napolitano is back. So what's at stake? Why do we care?
Okay, so this former Treasury Department official, Ms. Edwards, is accused of leaking to BuzzFeed, a well-known website that likes to expose these things, the private financial information of Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, and this Russian lady whose name is escaping me, Butina, excuse me, is her last name, all three of whom have been indicted by the feds. We know about Manafort, we know about Gates. The Russian lady's case hasn't come to trial yet. What did she reveal? She revealed something called a suspicious activity report, a lot of them. Suspicious activity reports are reports made by the bank when they think something is odd in your account. It can be perfectly lawful, but they think it's odd.
They flag it.
Correct. But in the report is personal banking information, and there are many of these reports. For example, if someone is depositing $9,999 every week in a bank account, knowing that if it's $10,000, it has to be reported to the Treasury, that's going to be suspicious. We don't know exactly what she got, but it was something akin to that. Not criminal, but suspicious.
So I just want to point out,
she's a Treasury official, and she betrayed the trust that the government put in her hands when it allowed her to access this stuff.
I want to point out, though, that these were already people that Mueller's investigation had in their sights. So why would somebody do something like this?
She probably is a hater of the president, employed in the, I'm saying probably, I don't know this woman, in the Department of the Treasury.
But based on her actions, that's what you're looking at.
Every one of her targets was either a pro-Trump person or somebody affiliated with him. The red herring here is this Russian spy, who, though she has been indicted for spying, her spying has nothing to do with President Trump or his campaign. Nothing whatsoever.
Wow.
So how she got all these characters in one basket, maybe we'll find out when she pleads guilty or if she's convicted or at the time of her trial.
Convicted of what? Like, what could she fix?
Well, the crime is revealing secret Treasury Department information, which also happens to be personal banking information of bank depositors. Gates, Manafort, and this Russian spy. Or the person the government says is a spy.
You're indicating some sort of bias here that could be at play. And so that would be, we're looking at the FBI and certain players there. We're looking at the DOJ and potentially maybe something there. And now we're looking at the Department of Treasury and maybe something there. We do need to get to the bottom of this.
Look, when Edward Snowden, we're talking about this in the break, made his revelations, he believed he was saving the Republic from massive government spying.
Different case.
It's entirely different. This woman just targeted people that politically she disliked or wanted to embarrass. Doesn't seem to be a moral defense to what she did.
Judge, always great to have you on the program.
Pleasure.
Thank you. We'll be right back.